and welcome to the Back in Business podcast with business journalist Liz Barkley and me, Mickey Clark. And this week we're talking about the vexed issue of young people in business. I don't think we've got much experience of that, but we have got long memories. Perhaps we should pass this job on to somebody else, Liz, who's a bit better qualified to mix with the young.
Speak for yourself. I'm done with the kids. What are you talking about? And anyway, diversity is what we need, and that's what we've got. We've got good age diversity on this team.
Well, that's right. Yeah, there's plenty of it. If you've come from Northern Ireland anyway.
We've got quite a few Northern Ireland voices as well, yeah. But there's a serious point here. Young people are being worst hit by this pandemic when it comes to jobs and to future opportunities. I think just about everybody is agreeing with that at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, they get hit from both sides. If they've got jobs, they've probably been furloughed. They're more likely to get laid off. And if they've started up in business, the businesses clearly won't have a long track record. Therefore, it makes arranging financing and finding experience to sort of take you through the minefield that much more difficult. So, yeah, they're getting it from all sides. This is a one-off. This has never happened before, and everyone's feeling their way. But if you've got experience, it's probably a bit more comforting than if you've been in business just a couple of years or even a few months.
Yeah, but it's not the first time that young people have been badly hit in a recession. 2008, young people coming out of school. When I left university, there were next to no jobs. Can you remember?
But when can you remember the last time that the businesses... Well, the First World War was still on then. I mean, the point being, I don't remember a time where businesses have just been shut down at a moment's notice. The cash flow has dried up completely. That's a new experience for everybody. And legally, they can't challenge it. And they're struggling. And I still think there'll be a lot of casualties out there because they won't recover.
And some of the businesses that are worst hit in the hospitality and tourism sector, for instance, are the places where young people look for temporary work while they're looking for a way to start their career, I suppose. And
the service sector, which traditionally would be labour intensive. And as we've said often before on this podcast, you know, businesses in this day and age rely on the cheap cost of labour a bit like a resource, just as another business would rely on oil or steel or something like that. And when the going gets tough, the first thing to get hit is the labour force. Whereas if companies invested a bit more in technology, you could train these people up to do better jobs and they wouldn't be cast aside when the going got tough.
Well, that's a point that perhaps we should put to the policymakers, but let us know, young, older, or in the middle, what's happening to your business or your freelance work. Email us at contactus@backinbusiness.org.uk. Find us on LinkedIn or at Twitter at business_backin. And
yeah,
Declan
Curry. When did he get promoted? Business editor.
He's
hardly in a position to talk about youth, is he?
When did I start hanging around with people who made me the youngest of the cohort?
Oh, boom, boom!
Oh.
I'm a mere child compared to you two.
I think that was 1993, wasn't it?
So's Disraeli compared to me. So, what do you make of it all, Declan?
What's up this week?
Well, this week has all been about big numbers. We've had figures showing that growth is starting to recover, but not by very much, and it's totally dwarfed by the slump in the economy that we had in April and then again in May. In the jobs market, we now know that almost 2/3 of a million people have lost their job from coronavirus, since coronavirus. But remember that we still have 9 million people who are in work but not doing any work because they're under furlough with the taxpayer picking up their wage bill. And we have had the figures on government borrowing, and we know the government's on track for a just massive, mind-bending figure of over £300 billion worth of new borrowing this year. Mickey, as you said, we haven't had anything like this outside of wartime. We haven't had borrowing like this outside of wartime as well.
No, it's huge. And what's made me chuckle a bit this week is that you look at the various rolling news channels and they agonise over every bit of data coming out. I mean, what a complete waste of time. most of it you can't gauge, because if you switch the engine off, the car ain't going anywhere, as we've said before. And that's what's happening at the moment. I think you can only get a general feel for the mood, if you like, of the market. And what was more interesting this week was the comments from Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, who said we really do need to start getting people back to work, or back into work, because a lot of the cities, particularly London, of course, are empty. The trouble is, of course, now people have got a taste of freedom and working from home, which is a natural thing to do. They ain't going to be dragged back to the workplace anytime soon.
Well, Mr. Bailey said that because, and Boris agrees with him, because they want to get people back in town and city centres so that we are buying coffee again, popping into the pub, getting a sandwich at lunchtime, supporting all those smaller businesses that rely on the traffic of office workers. But then along came the chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, yesterday and plunged a big spanner into that argument, saying that there was absolutely no reason that he could see why the advice on working from home should change. As we speak, Boris is on his feet right now, setting out the latest plan for this. And if you were looking for a plan that was clear and defined, then I'm afraid you are going to be disappointed, because Boris is effectively, the Prime Minister is effectively saying that, yes, he would like more people to work from the workplace, but he's leaving it entirely up to employers to decide what that judgment is. And the change in the policy is simply to say to employers, have a discussion with your workers about it and make your workplaces safe. That's as far as he's gone.
Clear as mud.
But workers are also saying, hang on a minute, we are not ready to go back out there. And
they don't feel safe.
Of course they don't. And I'm hearing from people who are saying, we reopened, we haven't got any customers. So we're reclosing again until September. And we'll see whether it's any better.
The local data company this week said only 52% of premises on the high street that could reopen have chosen to do so. And look over at the United States. You know, all this argument about how do we stimulate the economy? We tell people to go back to the office. We get that traffic running through town and city centres again. The big danger is if you do it too early, you then get more infections coming back, and that completely destroys confidence. And just look at the United States over the last 2 to 3 weeks now. Record numbers of new infections of coronavirus. California's had to shut down its outdoor economy once again. And yesterday, the US setting a completely new record for the number of infections. The American economy, which has had a recovery of sorts, you're going to see that evaporate again in the next couple of weeks because the government moved too early and it's wrecked confidence.
And they are taking, things as being said. I mean, if you want clarity, don't expect it from the government at the moment, because they're coming out with mixed messages all the time. People want clarity, but to be told to get back to work, but by the way, keep a metre distance and wear a face mask, is going to prove a problem. You're telling them, beware. Says when his face mask on. It's a big improvement.
His face mask on Zoom. Okay, guys, can we move this on, because we're talking about young people in business this week, and Breon Finch is our Back in Business Head of Policy and Research. Now, Breon, you wrote a blog this week about the lost generation, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Set the scene for us. In what way are you saying we've got a lost generation?
So I'm saying we've got a lost generation because in the last 12 years, there's been two major economic crises. And, the current financial crash, the 2008 financial crash and the current public health crisis. And people like myself, aged between, say, 25 and 34, who were leaving school, college, university in 2008, either didn't enter the workforce at the time, or we kind of did with opportunities that we weren't planning for. And effectively what's happened now is that COVID has compounded some of the disadvantage that was felt by that generation and is kind of stripping away, actually, because it is a different type of crisis. And so it's completely stripped away some of the opportunities. And it's right that the government has introduced a traineeship scheme for up to 24-year-olds. But actually, when 85% of those who are on furlough are over the age of 25, it kind of really paints a very bleak picture, particularly outside of the M25 and our major cities.
That's all very well, and we're going to talk about the individuals and how they were affected in a minute. But what about the impact on the economy? I mean, how will this affect the economy in the long term? Because we're losing talent here. We're losing years of earning capacity.
Yeah, so I mean, say someone the age of 30, they might have had already about 3-4 years potentially being taken off from their career progression at quite a young start. And so that should have probably massive effect in a way that we haven't seen in generations before. We would have to probably look back quite a way to previous economic crises that have happened quite closely together to see how that has impacted. But this, as I say, is a very different type of crisis that we've seen, this crisis. And so it is going to affect massively generationally, going across the generations, those that are having to pick up the bill, but also it's going to affect generationally in a way that, you know, as I say, it's compounded the disadvantage. One of the things that, you know, people around the age of 30, between 25 and 34, is that, you know, they're looking to settle down, they're looking to build their careers, they're wanting to start a business, they're wanting to own a property, they're wanting to start a family, they're wanting to do savings, all of these things where we're taking on more financial commitment. And when issues like this, you know, we don't have the opportunity to move on like that. Also, over the previous decade, there has been stagnant wages. There's been inflation that's kind of outstripped the pace of wage increases, and housing prices have just reached unrecognisable or unattainable levels, which all kind of goes to affect the opportunity, basically.
Brian, we're going to have a big conversation with Charlotte, Jyoti, Katie and you shortly. But let me bring in Christian Kerr, who is running a business in London. He's one of the founders of AI Core. Christian, I'm bringing you in earlier because I know that you can't stay with us for the podcast, but give us some idea of what you're finding. You're outside the 25 age bracket, so you're just underneath that. You've got your business set up. Are you feeling optimistic?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Liz. I mean, lucky enough, I couldn't be more optimistic. It's kind of come at a good time for us. Strangely, I know for a lot of people, COVID's been quite a detriment to their business, but the constraints have helped us completely change everything we do and actually grow much quicker than what we had anticipated. So yeah, I'm optimistic, but definitely rational.
But you're realistic. Give me just a quick rundown. What do you do? And what is it that makes you optimistic?
Sure. We basically teach graduates, mainly PhDs, postdoctorate students, to pair their academic knowledge with practical implementation skills. So in the field of artificial intelligence, the reason we're optimistic is we found over the course of the pandemic, we've got around 5,500 students across London that we were trying to place into jobs. And many of those students were getting rejected purely because all their knowledge was tapped up in theoretical knowledge. And we decided, we can pair that with the practical implementation. So we were able to launch an entirely new course with a lot of industry partners. And on top of that, all of our teaching was offline prior to this. One of the things we found is we truly believed that offline was the best teaching experience, and we had to change. So instead of using things like Zoom, which we had much difficulty, or Skype this morning, we started building our own online classroom, just to have the nuanced features of classrooms. And one thing that happened out of that is a lot of independent schools in the UK and London started using our software and asking to teach on it. So we've built almost an entirely different business line where we're running online classrooms.
Mickey, this is what we've been saying. We need young entrepreneurs willing to innovate, take risks, create jobs.
Yeah, and you've got to be able to back them and give them a bit of experience. I'm not sure that that's something that the banks can be relied upon to do. And as an aside, there's a debate raging this week about youngsters, about the desire in this country to send them to university and get degrees in Greek, when what you really need is a bricklayer. They're the sort of entrepreneurs. And the other one is Darcy Bussell, who's in the papers saying, look, hold on a second. We've got this shutdown and, we're all taking it carefully, but we are losing loads of talent. It's falling by the wayside because people are turning around and saying, oh, I'm not going to be a dancer. I've got to survive. I've got to bring in some income. I'll go and do something else. And that's where the waste is. That you've got these natural talents. People want to flourish, and this is basically squashing them.
And Christian, what would you then say? Obviously you're doing well, you're optimistic. What would you say to the government in light of, some of the things that we've been talking about? How do they get a grip on this?
Yeah, I mean, just touching on the point Mickey made there, what we'll hear from our corporate partners is that up to 80% of the things students are learning in university is irrelevant to the job that they're taking. So they're doing a degree that's just an overall kind of just you're dipping your toe in the water of what you really should be learning. So we're looking at more apprenticeship schemes within the things of data science and artificial intelligence. In terms of business, if I'm completely honest, in government, we don't even have the capacity to look at what type of loans government are supporting businesses with. It's not something we're even aware of. So we've never looked in that direction at all, purely because we don't have the time. And I think, if government can make things a lot easier, we've filled out a few applications for funding, and it's just a crazy, torturous amount of time that you have to do, taking the time to do these kind of things. And especially as a director of a company, it's not usually worth your time because the response is never positive. Any application we've made for funding hasn't been successful. And I know a lot of people will get fund riders that they'll spend some money on. But if it could just be easier to set that up and have an accountant reach out to you to do it, that'd be great.
Is it always money that you need, or is it the accountant, the support, the help, the advice?
Great question. I think it's individual to the business. For us personally, we're trying to grow, so money is just a medium to help us achieve that. But I wouldn't say money is what we need currently.
Guiding light.
More so, we need people and skilled people. So we have a lot of people that we teach, which we're kind of grateful for. We can take the students that we teach and pull them into work with us. But I think it's more the people that we need that just haven't got that skill set that we're looking for.
So interesting point there, and perhaps we need to look at how the education system interfaces with business. Otherwise, how on earth will we know what graduates or school leavers we need?
Yeah, I mean, you should be dangling a carrot to children at school and saying, look, this is a job you could do, or that's a job you could do. Do you like this? Do you enjoy it? And give them a feel for what it is, instead of just saying, you got to pass this exam, you got to pass that exam, and you end up with a load of kids that have left school with no practical, sense at all. And I think that's where we lose out a lot, because there's a lot of talent around, particularly at that age, that's just going to waste.
Well, Christian, I think you're still trying to come in there. I know you were going to leave us, but a final word?
Yeah, I mean, Liz, I know a few of us are from Northern Ireland here, and I grew up there myself, and I never find the school system very great.
There's another one yet.
and the one thing I would say is, children have a natural curiosity when they're at school, and I feel like school really replaces that with compliance. And I find that at my own school, which kills any creativity or any idea that you could leave. I was told in Northern Ireland you couldn't even go to London to go to university. You should stay put. And I think just opening up the possibility that there's other things you could do would be a great opportunity for many more students.
Well, look, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
I was told to get out as fast as you can.
That's an inspiration.
Me too.
And don't come back.
If he can get it right, well.
Let us know how the business is going, will you? And we'll come back to you on another podcast. That would be great, Christian.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. And
thank you very much. Thank you very much. So can we bring in Jyoti Ramby, who is Back in Business Chief Reporter. She's also a freelance business journalist. Charlotte Brokenbrow, who is co-director of the White Tent Company in Cardiff. Katie Matthews, who runs Excel in Education Tutoring School and the Mind Tribe. And Breon, of course, is here. Breon, we wanted to discuss a bit more around about what you were talking about the lost generation. Katie, Charlotte, Jyoti, what do you think of Breon's hypothesis that we're losing a generation because they went into the 2008 recession, leaving school, and they've come 12 years later to a grinding halt now that we've got another recession.
I think you're sort of bang on there, because I graduated in 2012 and the job market then was dire, and it took quite a while for me to find a job. And then when I did, I realised the best thing to do at that time was to go back into education. So that's what I did. And I know that a lot of people did struggle, and for them, a lot of people have also ended up doing things they didn't necessarily set out to do because there wasn't the opportunity that they wanted at that time.
And then you became a freelance.
Yes.
As a freelance business journalist.
Yeah, so I only started earlier this year, and the initial idea was just to go freelance for a few months. And then the lockdown happened, and what I had lined up all fell through. So I was in a situation which I wasn't expecting, and I've had to just find my way, if you like. And it's been an interesting ride, I would say.
Shall we hear more about that?
Still smiling.
Shortly. Charlotte, what about you? You're running the White Tent Company in Cardiff. What do you do, and what's your reaction to this argument?
Well, the White Tent Company is a murder mystery events company. So we have only started from last September. So we've been hit very much this time around, rather than the recession in 2008. We've definitely been hit by this one. As an events company, obviously everything just grinded to a halt. Events were cancelled, they were postponed till next year, or at least they're still happening, but it's a bit upsetting that they have been postponed. But it is just like what Bjorn has been saying, is that the people who are new get hit the worst because they're kind of forgotten. It feels like you just go through the net and no one's there to catch you, because people just don't think either you don't know enough about it because you're new to either the business or the sector, or just because you don't have enough evidence that you are doing what you're doing. So you normally just get forgotten about and just left to the side, because the people who actually have the experience and the history and the evidence get helped first.
It's dire to feel that you've been completely forgotten about. But Jyoti as well, you said, you've fallen through the cracks and there's nobody there to catch you. Katie Matthews, what's your experience? The Mind Tribe, what's that?
Hi, thanks for having me on today. The Mind Tribe UK is a mental health and wellness training company. So I go in and train educators, I work with charities, I go into corporate environments and train people basically in ways that they can support their staff's mental health, support children's mental health. As I myself have lived with mental illness now for 11 years. So it's something that I'm very, very passionate about. And you were just saying there, Charlotte, about feeling forgotten, feeling left behind. I'm in exactly the same position, where myself and my fiance, actually, he started his company 6 months ago as well. So we're both in this position where we're in that 5% that's been left behind. That's what the Chancellor said, there's 5% of people that aren't going to get the help, but we both fall into that category. Because we haven't got staff, we haven't got premises, we're not eligible for the bounce back loan. So every single door was being closed. And the only thing that we've been able to receive is universal credit. So we're in this position where we've got a mortgage, like we're both 28, we've got a mortgage, we've got, bills to pay, same as everybody else. But it almost became a case of, right, we need to go into survival mode, where it was anything that isn't necessary needs to get cut. What can I look at in terms of innovation? I moved all my teaching online. I've developed online courses. So yes, there has been opportunity in terms of innovation and being able to be creative. But at the same time, all the onus is being put on us, as in we have to find a way to make money and to support ourselves. When we've been contributing to the economy, we've been paying our tax, we've been paying our national insurance. Yet, when it's come for us needing help, nobody's been there for us.
Yeah. And what about, Casey, when things do pick up, which I'm sure they will one day, is your business in a position to take advantage of that? Or have you been so starved of cash and resources that you're going to struggle to make headway?
I think in terms of, this is for me personally, I actually fall into the highly vulnerable group because of the treatment that I'm on. So I have to be really careful as I have an autoimmune condition. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to deliver face-to-face or when that time frame will be, you know, I'll be able to physically go back into
You
companies.
can't sit and do one-for-ones, basically.
Yeah. So it's basically a case of sitting on Zoom, or other platforms are available. Sitting.
Thankfully.
Yes, as we found today.
Or not, as the case may be.
Yeah. It's just a difficult time because everything is really uncertain. And as you were saying earlier, you know, Boris isn't being exactly very clear. And it leaves us in an awkward position then because it's like things are open to interpretation. Like my consultant is telling me something different than what the government's telling me. And then you have your family saying, but we really want to see you. And then obviously in terms of my own mental illness, I live with anxiety and depression. So I need to go outside. I need to go out and exercise. I need to go out for a walk because I've been cooped up indoors since March. It's July. Do you know what I mean? So it's literally like, I need to see other humans.
Yes, doesn't bear thinking about.
Get
and
to my
Charlotte,
age, you won't need to. Don't worry.
I'll be sick of everyone by then.
Charlotte, also from your point of view, how are you going to be coming out of this, do you reckon? What's your thinking? What's your projections?
Well, we're just going off what our clients are going to think. So we mainly go through the team building route of murder mysteries, rather than doing actual like performances and doing other live events. We go through team building, so we go into people's workplaces and offer them exercises to help work together. So that all depends on if they're comfortable with us coming in and even doing the work ourselves, which that's all on their part, not on ours. We can't force them to do something they don't want to do. So it's up to them if their workplace is safe for them and their employees, and if it's safe enough for us to come into the space too. And obviously we'll have to make sure that we're safe coming into their environment to make sure they feel comfortable as well. So it's more of a back and forth communication with any of our clients if they do feel comfortable enough to even hire us in the first place to come and do our services. However, we have the same as Katie, we've kind of innovated and we've put a lot of our services online. So we've done mini mysteries that people can print off and just do at home, family friendly ones. We've done virtual murder mysteries with people, which is loads of fun. And there's just a bunch of other ways that we're trying to make it a lot more innovative and try to involve more people without actually having to physically be there to make them feel a lot more comfortable.
Can we nominate somebody to be murdered? Because I think Mickey, Declan, you
I
and
know
I
who's going to
would...
be lined up for that.
But Breon, to your hypothesis, you know, Charlotte, when you graduated, things were tough. Do you think you would have been further up the career ladder had that not been the case? Where, you know, to Breon's hypothesis that this is the second whammy. Do you feel that you're going to ultimately, at the end of your career, have missed out on lots of earning opportunities? Or do you actually think that it makes you more resilient and you go for it where you might not?
I think in a way it does make people more resilient, 100%. It's made me more resilient, even just within the company that I run, and also I freelance on the side as well. As it's only a startup, so I have to work alongside my own company at the same time to make ends meet. So in both scenarios, I've had to be a lot more resilient and just think of new ways to go about things. And also just realise that the skills I do have, even though in this one moment I might not be able to do my dream job, for instance, those skills I have can fit into another area just for the time being. And that this moment does change and we can still go forward and get what we want in the future, even if it isn't something which we want to do right now in this moment.
Breon, that's something you didn't touch on.
Well, no, I didn't. Yes, this is the thing. I think that the opportunities that can come out of recessions such as this can actually create much more dynamism. They can create opportunities in other ways. It's just that our economy isn't, in the traditional sense of our economy, it isn't set up for this type of working. And so the opportunities that have gone in generations before are not affording themselves to the generation that is currently having to live through this again. And also it's a pandemic. This is a once in 100 years, maybe once in 200 years event. The economy has radically changed from the last pandemic that we saw. And so it's about, what is the government going to do? What is the government doing to speak to young people in this age bracket who are affected, and who some people outside of, say, the M25, where economic opportunity is much more sparse, are thinking perhaps that the system isn't working for them. So that's the kind of where I'm looking for. There are innovators such as everyone here, and there are people who are resilient such as everyone here. But there are some people who need that additional support.
Yeah, they need the additional support, but it seems to me that additional support doesn't exist. Or if it does exist, it's very hard to get a handle on.
Yes,
it's very hard to
absolutely.
find.
And so this is part of the levelling up agenda, really, where government needs to focus. However, at the minute, I don't see anything in government rhetoric that is going to look to this generation and specifically target them with incentive, or I don't know, anything, maybe even like actually building some houses, for example, because we do live in a property owning democracy. All of these things, I don't see it happening at the minute in their rhetoric, apart from, infrastructure bills. But, a bridge up in Cumbria going over, a river up there is brilliant. It doesn't serve this generation who are working the way that they are, innovating, creating in the way that they are either.
And it's 5 years down the line. There's no immediate benefit short term. You have to have shovel-ready contracts, and there just aren't enough of them around.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so, and we even have a skills shortage for that sort of infrastructure build. So, it's kind of taking with one and giving with the other, but that we don't have the necessary bodies to fill that in either. So it's quite frustrating, and it's because of the last 10 years where this generation has been ignored, I would argue, quite largely by all politicians, on all sides of every colour in the house, that we've ended up in this situation.
Let's bring, Declan and Brian, what can we expect this week?
Mickey, I think there's a point about this, that when we talk about young workers in difficult economic times, that they are always the ones that are hit first and hardest. And that's a combination of a whole range of different factors. And it's difficult to fix all of them in one easy step. Young workers are more likely to be in more flexible employment to get their first job. But the flip side of that is that they're in employment that is less secure. They are more likely to work in the leisure economy, in hotels, in pubs, in shops, because that's, for many people, the gateway to work. It is the first step into the job market. And those are the jobs that are usually the first to go when companies have to cut back. And what I'm hearing from young workers is that they feel, first of all, they feel a bit dislocated when they hear people like the Prime Minister say, we've got to get out, we've got to go spending in the pubs and in restaurants, because they think, well, hang on, we haven't got any money. And when they then come to the position where they're running things, they may draw some lessons from this period. They may say that actually we need a system of employment that provides more security, even if that comes at the cost of flexibility. And some of them may also think, and we've heard this come through in our particular discussion today, that the system is rigged against them, that the money is with people who are older, that house prices are as high as they are, and that benefits people who are in retirement or on the brink of retirement. It doesn't help first-time buyers at all.
And I mean, isn't the problem that the message has got to come from the government? Because at the moment, Boris is out in the front leading, but he's following the science. And just like The Economist, if you have a dozen scientists in the room, you'll get 13 opinions.
If only he was following the science, that might give us a bit more clarity. The confusion is coming because the scientists, like Paddy Vallance, are saying one thing, that we've got to stay working from home. And Boris and the Governor of the Bank of England are saying something else. Boris said today, by the way, just in his media briefing today, that whilst he respects the scientific advice, it is the politicians who make the decisions.
To come back to, Breon, to your conversation, what needs to be done? How do we address the issues? How do we end up in a situation where we don't fall into the same traps again, and where young people aren't ultimately left carrying the can?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting question because I did think, in preparation for today's podcast, of course, like, what is my ask really? And really, it's people will say, I mean, my experience was that I was 18 in 2008. I left school and there was absolutely zero opportunity out there for me to get a job, even the smallest of jobs, even in my local newsagent. There was completely nothing. I can imagine that this pandemic has brought about exactly the same challenges for people who are 18 and going to be leaving school, say September, or have even already left school. And so my ask really kind of is that this is an opportunity now, because the previous decade, 12 years, there hasn't really been much of a working towards creating policy that reflects needs of this generation that's growing up. But also, this generation is not so vocal. We don't really have us, and you can see from the guests that we've had this morning that essentially they don't necessarily have the ask. They see the issue or the solution is coming from them in their businesses, which is, I think, really fantastic. But the government could do more to use that entrepreneurialism, that innovation, and that creativity, that drive. These people, this age group is incredibly aspirational, and when you have an aspirational, class, age group, then that creates opportunity for the government to really, essentially, work with them much, much better than they have already. So this is an open opportunity, really, for the government to not just think about those who are entering the workforce now, but to start to detangle some of the kind of the policies and some of the kind of working in which it's instituted for the last decade and a bit, and start tackling into that generation that's now going to be hopefully moving us out of, and by the way, also paying for the COVID bill as well for the financial crash and the COVID bill for the rest of our lives. So that's my kind of ask, really.
Breon's exactly right, because I can remember the 1980s when we had a surge in youth unemployment as well, and we had the YOPs and we had the YTS as the way of either getting people ready for work again or just massaging down the unemployment figures. But I think the lesson that was drawn from then was that you unlock the future by giving people the skills they need to be economically successful in the future. So if you apply that to today, you're looking at making sure that when kids leave school, when graduates leave university, they've got the skills that are useful to the likes of Christian Care. They're able to do the AI, that they're able to work in the new factory that has been unveiled for Wales today, making car batteries for electric cars, or working in that hydrogen energy plant that's going to be developed along the Humber that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, or we've got the skills in robotics and in nanotechnology. We've got to prepare kids for jobs that today we can't yet envision.
I absolutely agree with that. Josie, you want to come in?
So, sort of on that, but that's for school leavers and graduates right now. But what about people my generation who have worked hard, who have built up a set of skills? My question is, do you not think the government system and the way they tax businesses is a bit old-fashioned now because the way we work has changed?
Yeah, I absolutely get that. The reason why you would be saying that. What about Katie and Charlotte? What are you thinking in your own situations? Do you feel that you've been badly let down, or that somehow or other you need to find a way through this yourselves?
Yes, I think I obviously raised that issue earlier, that I think the onus has been put onto us as young people, and it's very much a case of you need to do it yourself. We're not going to be there for you. But at the same time, as I said, we have been paying our taxes, we've been paying our national insurance, yet we're not getting any support back. But we're going to be the ones that are then footing the bill after, we start to come out of this pandemic. So it's a bit of a, I don't know how to say this in a nice way. It's a bit of a kick in the teeth.
Don't worry about the niceness.
That's polite enough, yeah.
Just say it.
It is, yeah. It's a bit of a kick in the teeth, to think we were the ones, as we said, we're hit in 2008. I was 16 in 2008 and had just finished my GCSEs. Then went on to college, and then different things happened, but decided to obviously move over to Northern Ireland to go to Queen's for university. But in terms of, job opportunities, it was negligible, basically. It was a case of, if you get a job, you hold on to it. Like, I managed to get a job, but that was only because I knew somebody who knew somebody. It wasn't necessarily, okay, you've got exactly what we're looking for here, but it's something you can learn. But that's obviously the hospitality and catering sector. As you say, it's something that's not necessarily the most secure position, because obviously if we were back in that time now, we would have been the first ones to go. And that's what, obviously teenagers and young people are going through now. And we're experiencing this again 12 years later in a slightly different way, that we're now the business owners, but we're still not getting any help. So it's like, what more do we need to do? We've gone down the route of employment. We've gone down the route of entrepreneurship. We've tried to be innovative. We've tried to be creative. We've utilised our resources. We've done our qualifications. We've contributed to the economy. What else do you want from us?
I think it's a very fair question. Charlotte, does that resonate with you?
It does, quite a lot. I completely agree with what Katie said, that we've just been left to our own devices without any support, or even anywhere to go to even look for support. We've kind of had to help each other. It's kind of like the blind leading the blind. We're just all walking around not knowing what to do, and we're just looking for that support, and it's just not there at all. And like what Katie said, it's happened again. It happened in 2008 and it's happening now. So surely you'd think that they would have learned from their mistakes. It's fine to make mistakes, but surely making them more than once is a bit too much. So
no, they don't learn, believe me.
They never learn.
And you've got to remember, we hear this every generation, that people like us sat and moaned about 30 years ago about the old fogies, the coffin dodgers, and now we're in the same position, and youngsters quite rightly are complaining about us. Well, I'm one, yeah, quite admit it. So it goes on, and it does seem as though we don't learn, and you mentioned tax, don't even go down that route.
Well, Josie mentioned tax. Josie.
Yeah. I was just going to pick up from what Charlotte said about them making a mistake. In the last recession, it was the small businesses and the freelancers, they're the ones that got this economy back up and running. So you think that the government would give us more support, especially those of us who have just started out. But yet we are the forgotten ones. We've slipped through the cracks. So how can you then expect us to get this economy backing up again?
Okay. All right. So what do you want? What do you want from government? Katie, in Northern Ireland, the government hasn't been any more helpful than here, presumably, from what you're saying. What do you want them to do?
Stop arguing over things that are not necessarily irrelevant, but things that don't take priority in a current situation. As you know yourself, we have a divided society over here. And it's easy for me to comment on that, obviously coming from England, and it's not a case of, I don't fully respect the traditions over here and the culture, but at the same time, you have to understand that there's priorities, and there's things that need to be put in place now. We can worry about the other stuff down the line. That's something we could revisit. It's not going away. It's part of people's identity. It is something that we are going to look at again. It's not as if we haven't looked at it for the last however many 100 years. But at the same time, we have to think, okay, do we need to be discussing what flag is flying, or I don't know, who's allowed to attend what funeral, when we need to be talking about the children that are vulnerable, the people that are living in poverty, the people that are homeless, kids that need to be fed, supporting teachers to get them back into school so that our kids are being educated. That's what's frustrating for me. Is because, as we were saying there, the government hasn't been supporting us. We're expected to do it ourselves. I actually went through bankruptcy a couple of years ago, and off the back of that experience, I was only 26 when it happened. And off the back of that, I then set up the Young Entrepreneurs Network in Northern Ireland, because nothing like that existed over here. There was nobody for us to go to. And as you say, Charlotte, sometimes it is a bit of a case of the blind leading the blind. I don't always know what I'm doing. But, it's a case of we need a community. There was support that was needed, and it still is needed, And at the moment, I'm struggling to be at the helm of that, and to lead the organisation, because I do it all voluntarily. It's just something I believe in, because obviously what I experienced as a young businesswoman, I was 23 when I set up my first company. So I could see that we need support. There's a whole gap here that needs to be filled, that I decided, right, we're going to fill that, and we're going to establish this voluntary network. But we've been relying on older, more experienced entrepreneurs. Yeah, I'll reword that.
You know as well already.
Older's fine.
Yeah.
Speak for
You
yourself.
get called worse.
We've been relying on them to offer their knowledge and offer their time. They've been amazing. Like, the business community in Northern Ireland is fantastic, and the startup community in terms of being supportive of each other. You've got venture capitalists that are starting up over here. You've got startup champions. It really is a great place for it. But now it's a case of, well, how do we emerge from that? What is the government going to do to support us? And it's almost like, it sounds silly, maybe we don't know what we don't know.
Well, you don't know the questions to ask.
Yeah, we don't know what we need because we haven't been through it before. It's like, we need money to pay our bills.
I think that's a very good point. Charlotte, what would you be saying to the Welsh government?
Well, I feel like the Welsh government haven't been as bad. They have been a little bit late on things, but not as bad. So startups were actually given the opportunity to apply for a grant just earlier this month, which is not a lot, but at least it was something, which I know quite a lot of other governments haven't actually offered startups. And it was something where it was kind of like a light bulb moment. You're like, finally, they can see us. We are actually here, and they've noticed us. It did take a bit of campaigning from quite a few people. And it was like the more experienced people, the more experienced companies that were saying, you're going to let these people slip through the cracks, and their companies are just going to go off the market, and they're not going to be able to come back from this. So it was good that they have seen us, but they've still got a lot more work to do. But the same as Katie said, we don't know what we want because we haven't experienced business as the same as other people have. So we don't know what we need. We need them to understand that we are still fresh and we're still new, and we just need that support to become a lot more stable and just a lot stronger.
Well, I think that's an amazing point, really. Jyoti, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it would be nice if some of the stuff like the startup funds and that could be available in England from the English government, from Westminster, and just clarity overall, clarity over the way the lockdown is easing, clarity for businesses, and after when all this is over, maybe have a look at our system, how taxes work, our business models. Maybe bring it into the future, into the 21st century.
That'd be a good place to start. Breon, final word to you, because you set this all up. You started this conversation. What are you thinking now?
Well, I mean, really the government needs, and governments of all countries in the UK, I think, need to improve their engagement with this age group. They need to really, really pare down what the needs are. And you're completely right. Because we haven't had to be in this situation before, and also because we started out in this situation, we don't know any different. And you don't have to look very far to the generation above and higher than that as well, to see the knowledge, the skills, and the opportunities that they've had built into their careers, their financing, everything that they've gone about and achieved. And if we are to achieve the same, then government really needs to look at that, all of that, take it together as well with different parts of the UK, different parts, say, outside the M25, and work it into their levelling up agenda, which is apparently going to be coming very, very shortly. So that's what I want to see. Otherwise, we will be a lost generation. We'll be a sort of no man's land where opportunity was stripped away. And then how do you build in the opportunity for the next generation?
On behalf of the older lot here, can I say, please don't give up, because without your innovation, keep peddling. Without you innovating, taking risks, and creating jobs, the economy is going to be sunk. So we're relying on you guys to get on with it. Mickey, I'm.
Well,
I don't know what to say, really.
I don't know where to start. But that's it from us for this week. Next week, we're going to tackle the subject of rural businesses, and they're not all about farming, which will make news round this way.
No, lots of rural businesses. What do you mean, this way in Kent?
URE, yes, out in the boonies.
Lots of rural businesses are saying it's about connectivity. So it's about broadband, it's about transport, it's about cash, even being connected to a cash machine. So there are lots of issues that we will talk about. If you want to get in touch, please email us at contactus@backingbusiness.org.uk or find us on LinkedIn and Twitter at business_backing. See you next week.